EGU is pretty much my favorite meeting of the year. I've gone almost every year for since 10 years now, since 2013. Even in the weird COVID years when things were online, I was doing it. It's incredibly invigorating, like any big scientific conference, but it also has, well, this sounds cliche, but it just has this feel that other conferences don't. There's people there, many people there that I wouldn't see anywhere else. And it's just an awesome opportunity to realize just how truly international Earth science is. And yeah, I'm thrilled that I'm going to be able to go again.
And you have a session as part of a huge hours, a day long
Yeah.
session talking about similar things to what the dust squared cluster does. You get like 5 minutes in there, if I'm looking at the schedule right, 5 to 7. Is that right? How long you get to present in there?
It's a big day. It's Tuesday of the EGU week, and yes, there's always a session about windblown dust, and it spans the whole day. It's this is the 20th anniversary of that session, if I understand correctly. So they're bringing in extra special invited speakers, and we have Tuesday's a pretty marquee day during the overall rhythm of the week. And the session that I'm presenting in is in this format that the EGU tends to do more of than other meetings I've been to. It's called Presenting Interactive Content. The abbreviation acronym is PICO. And yes, it's exactly as you described. Everyone in my PICO session will have not 5, but 2 minutes to stand up and present the true thumbnail sketch, elevator pitch of their project, bang, 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 one after the other. And then we all scatter to the perimeter of this room where there are interactive big screen monitors where you essentially run a poster session off of the screen. So it's resource intensive, obviously. They can't run every session this way, but it, in my experience, does a really great job of achieving the perfect fusion, maybe, between the benefits you get from a poster where you stand up and ideally have the undivided attention of the audience, but not a lot of time for questions typically. Sorry, that would be a talk. And then the
Yeah.
poster session where you have lots of people coming by and you interact with them more one-on-one. So the ideal here is that we're doing both of that in a couple hours on Tuesday morning.
Fascinating. So it gets to you. You're up there, you're prepped, you do your 2 minutes, you sit down, you go for an hour, half hour, 45 minutes, then you go over to your poster area,
Yeah,
your screen area, and then
yeah,
people who made a note like, oh, that guy, I want to go find out more about that one.
yes,
What do you do as an attendee during your Pico session if you hear something that you want to find out
yeah.
more about? Like, how do you navigate that?
Well, I suppose that's always a challenge, even in a more traditional poster session. You're supposed to stand at your poster and you know there's others up and down your row or maybe on the other side of the conference hall that you want to go and see and you make it work. But one nice thing about the Pico as well is they're available all day long, maybe even throughout the entire meeting. You know, people can queue them up and view them on these big screens at their leisure. You're not necessarily there, but ideally, some people will see it and be engaged with it and maybe follow up with me, even if I don't talk with them during the time when I'm live.
You're going to be in the European Union. Do you get to go out and do any touristy stuff, or is it just 100% focused on science while you're there?
Well, you know what it's like when you go to one of these big conferences. It's a pretty, yeah, it's a pretty deep dive. You know, you want to make the most of it, particularly when you travel to the other side of the world. But the conference is not all day long, which is maybe a good thing. Um, and yes, I have a lot of colleagues I'm looking forward to reconnecting with. I have lived in Vienna before, so for me, it's a very familiar place, and I'm looking forward to being back. Late April will be a lovely time of year to be there. And yes, as you can tell from my response to your questions, I'm looking forward to it. It's a great meeting.
I see that you are also, and I assume that you are the Jeffrey S. Munroe, that is one of the collaborators on seasonal and annual kinematics of active rock glaciers under different climate regimes in the Western USA. Is that you?
It is indeed me. I cannot lie. That's another project that I'm fortunate to have support for from the National Science Foundation. And my colleague on that project, Al Hanwerger, is going to make the presentation on behalf of us at the meeting. So he'll be there, and I'm looking forward to that.
I think it's one of the great things about the work of the Dust Squared cluster is how collaborative all of the members of the cluster are outside of that particular 5-year project. Like you brought some people who are really, really active, Mackenzie Skiles, Janice Brainey, Greg Carling, all these people collaborating across all these fields, and you bring them together. Do you find it hard to stay focused on the Dust Squared project, or is this like the shining example of the work you're doing right now?
At the end of the day, some days I end up working pretty focused on something else, and there's other days that are all about the Dust Project. And of course, my day job is also to teach. So
Yes.
there's a lot going on for sure, but I've always been invigorated by those types of situations. I've been really fortunate over the years to have fairly consistent funding to run these projects, and for me, the somewhat infrequent gaps between funding have, I guess they've afforded an opportunity to catch my breath, but they felt kind of plain in comparison to the excitement of being involved with collaborative research with colleagues both here and outside of Middlebury. So I prefer this, even if it's frenzied at times.
You mentioned your teaching duties, and I know that that is something that's really important to you as well, both personally and professionally, obviously. Is that something you talk to your students about? Is you're going to be collaborating with a bunch of people. You're going to have to be balancing all of these things at the same time. Like as you're doing your homework here for this class, you have these other classes, get used to it because that's life as a scientist.
It's true. It's absolutely true, and I do find myself, particularly in the last 10 years or so, incorporating more and more opportunities for group work at different scales in class. It's sometimes letting best friends work together, sometimes enforcing that they work with people they don't know, people that might have different class experiences and so on, depending on what their course background is. So those are ways to simulate what lies after college, since yes, they may go to work in a scenario that allows them to work on things completely independently. More often than not, though, they're going to need to collaborate, and learning how to do that comes with experience.
Just a couple more questions. We've got a bunch of stuff going on. This time of the semester is always busy. I want to really ask you about the paper that you're presenting, about the dust squared, the
Yeah.
seasonal and interannual variability in dust flux to high elevation ecosystems in the southwestern United States. Now, part of this is published under the Creative Commons license. You're putting it out there for everybody to see. That is a huge sort of change in science over the past 50, 100, 25, 5, 10 years, is to make it more available and more open. Why is that important to you as a researcher and a scientist to make sure that your findings and your thoughts are available to as many people as possible?
Yeah, that's a really astute observation, and I'd say that this kind of change or the shift has actually happened maybe even more recently than you thought, and it's ongoing now. Whether it's on the front end in terms of the data themselves, and how quickly data should perhaps be made available to the broader community, or if it's on the far end, how papers should be available to the broader community. And it's been exciting to navigate. And the EGU is a leader in that, with open access journals and presenting or publishing abstracts and making them available, like in the Creative Commons system, as you noted. I think it's great. I think it's frustrating to me in a way to now run into situations where I can't easily get a hold of something. I hear about a talk someone gave at a conference that I wasn't able to attend, and I go to look at it, and it's like, oh, the abstracts are only available for people who were there. I can understand from a business model perspective why that might be, but it really does seem to throw sand in the gears of collaboration and moving science forward. So it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time watching open access take or to flourish, really, at all stages of the scientific process.
I'm going to ask this one little question. What you said made me think about the business of science and
Yeah.
research, and the business of publishing journals and publishing research. And it's, would you like to be freed of the business aspect? Like, I just want to go and think about ideas and share my ideas and look at some cool stuff with people. Like, how do you balance that, the field work and the nitty gritty of the science with the business of science?
Yeah, I mean, in a pure sense, maybe you'd like to imagine a world where they could be separate, but in reality, you had to compete to get funding to run your project in the first place. Then you had to manage the budget during the duration of the project, and then you have to think about where to send resources in terms of publishing or going to conferences to disseminate your results. And then you're thinking about what the funding options are for the next cycle. So science doesn't exist purely separate from those more reality based considerations.
Capitalism. It even gets its tendrils into research.
Maybe.
Last question for you today is, if you had a chance to talk to someone who's going to EGU for the first time, this is their very first time going, could you seek 3 top tips that you would give to a first-time attendee of EGU?
Well, this is not happening this year, but many times I've actually brought a student or several students with me. And so I guess I maybe have some experience in giving exactly this advice. I think one thing would be the nuts and bolts of planning ahead, because during the day on Monday is the wrong time to be figuring out what you want to see on Monday, because you will invariably miss things. It's such a dynamic conference. You need to plan at least one day ahead. Number two, I would encourage anyone to, of course, make the most of the things which are directly relevant to their interest and subspecialty, but I would also cast a wide net. Is the European Geoscience Union, which means there are going to be people there who are experts in things that are far from any one person's specialty, and maybe things you've never even heard of before, and you could learn an awful lot by going to those other sessions. And I guess the third thing would simply be to don't worry about getting lost in the convention center, because it happens to everybody. The place is really quite a curious floor plan. We'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to stop recording. We'll stick around just to sort of wrap up. Thank you so much for taking some time on this windy but beautifully sunny day in Vermont.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you, Andrew. Thank you.